Assalamu alaikum. How are you all? So, you remember that we studied Pakistan Resolution, Congress Rule, 1935 Act during our last lecture, right? Today we will take a start from to cover events from 1940 till 1947, which is, the year of independence of both India and Pakistan. What happened? We have a CRIPS mission.
Yes.
Have you heard about the CRIPS?
Yes,
Now, what happened? Why did this CRIPS come to India? And what was he proposing? And what were the causes on the international front for it?
he said that you should join us against the World War II was going on, and he said that you should join us against Germany and France, and we'll fulfill your whatever you need, or we'll give you whatever you need.
Yes, right. But they were asking the Indians to fight against the Japanese. Against the Japanese, they were, allies of the Axis power. They were in the Axis powers, not with the Allies power, right? So Japan had already attacked Pearl Harbor. You might have heard about the attack of the Pearl Harbor. If you haven't read in textbooks, you might definitely have watched it in some movies, right? But the Pearl Harbor attack was carried out by Japan. So it destroyed the whole naval base, and they were counting on the power of the United States of America, that it would come to the rescue of the powers, the Great Britain, and the France, but the United States of America from the Pacific side, they were hit hard by Japan, because Japan was on the side of Germany, and now Japan was an Asian power, right? So the British government thought they had already reached to Burma. Japanese had already reached to Burma, Myanmar, current day Myanmar, right? And the British government wanted India to play its vital role in the Second World War. In case of an attack on India, the Indians should be able to defend India, which was British India at that time. So they were just trying to buy the support of the Indian people. This was, and for that they just came up with a formula, which we normally call the CRIPS mission. So this is the advancement of Japan. On the one hand, in Pacific, Pearl Harbor, right, hit the United States of America. Then it had taken Philippines, Malaysia, and the border of Assam, which is Burma. They were already with the borders of Assam in Burma, right? So they were attacking the British colonial empire, or the British colony of India. They were planning to attack it. They were encircling it, right? And they were spreading. It was quite easy for them to attack. So in this situation, Cripps, a member of the war cabinet, was sent to India in March 1942 to get India's cooperation to fight the war, right? We have already studied that the Congress just resigned. That why did you declare as a belligerent state? In the previous class we studied that thing. So now Indians were not ready to fight this war, and over here they were now asking them to come and fight with us. You can see this, the pictures of the mission when they came, and what did they say. We would discuss it shortly. This was the proposal. India would be given dominion status after the war, like that which is enjoyed by Canada and Australia. So this dominion status would be given to India, right? Secondly, a constituent assembly to final the constitution. Assembly would be formed, and that assembly would finalize the constitution for India, not the British government, and the assembly would be comprised of the Indians mostly, right? Again, they say that okay, princely states to be free to join India or remain independent. This would be up to the princely states. If they want to join India, okay. If they do not want to join India, then we would let them go free, right? They can remain independent. Provinces, they promised that provinces could decide to be separate from India and frame their own constitution, to be separated from India and frame their own constitution. This is what they say, right? Like the provinces were given a larger say regarding their own fates, right? But till the final notification or till further notice, you know, the defense of the united India would be handled by the British government, right? This was the, this is kind of the gist of the Cripps proposal, right? Now, rejection of the proposal, the parties sat together, they just pondered over it, but then they rejected it. They said that, okay, it's not enough, we need more, right? Because the British was stuck. The logical outcome of any such kind of situation, when your enemy is stuck, you hit him hard, so that you just, you know, achieve your objectives. Now the enemy was, or the oppressor was in India, and it was with a proposal, you know, because it was coming from a weaker position. So it came with a proposal. They knew that, okay, now if we demand more, we would be given more. So why should we accept these proposals? We should be asking for something else which we need, right? These proposals are again just a means to dupe us, so we would not be duped now. Okay, what were the points? You know, they call it the division of the nation, that we would not approve this division of the nation. Provinces would be allowed to, okay, be separated if they want. The princely states, if they want to join India, okay. If they do not want to join India, they would be allowed to be independent. So it is kind of, you know, an attack on the unity of India for most of the political parties. They termed that as an attack on the unity of India, right? Now dominion status, there was no time limit given that for how long India would remain under the dominion status. You should, you know, just say that, okay, for 30 years, for 50 years, for 10 years, it would be a dominion status, remain under the dominion status, and then complete independence. But that thing was vague. The declaration was quite vague. So they did not accept it on these terms, right? Representatives of the princely states, you know, they were nominated, and in this way, this was again an objective, that why did you nominate such and such representatives of the princely states for consideration and deliberation, and, you know, why didn't you call all of them, and what would be the fate of it, you know? So these kind of issues and these kind of criticisms, they were leveled against the Cripps mission, and the voices were raised against it, and the Cripps proposal, they were, in short, you might call that, they were rejected. Now when they were rejected, what happened after the rejection? Okay, they say, we do not approve this, we are not children to just be duped by you. But then they started the Congress, it started the Quit India movement. Okay, don't come to us with a proposal, just quit it, quit India. Okay, we do not need you over here. So that was the Quit India movement at that time. Hindustan Chhod Do Tehreek, right? The Quit India movement. These are the pictures of the Quit India movement, like people used to march. The Hindus mostly, they used to march, and they used to protest against the British rule in India. They said, okay, we need independence, just leave us, right? One of the causes of the Quit India, failure of the Cripps mission. You know, communal flare-up in India. So the Congress, in their opinion, the British were giving consideration to the ideas of Muslims, and they were considering the demand of the separate homeland for the Muslims and these kind of things. So that is why this partial provision of independence for provinces and princely states was kept in the Cripps proposal. So they did not approve of this thing, right? Then the Japanese threat, you know, as I have already told you, that it was already in Burma. Now in the eyes of the British people, why do they need to fight with Japan, right? Just because of the presence of British over here, right? Because they were colony of the British government. So if the British government leaves India, then there are no enemies of Japan. They are just free. Japan is advancing towards India just because that it has it is embroiled in a war with Great Britain on many international fronts because of an alliance. So if Great Britain leaves this place, then they would not need to fight with Japan, right? So this was again another thing, and they just wanted them to leave. Now the impact of the Quit India movement, right? You can see these pictures, mass movements were, people were contacted, mass contact movements were started, and Gandhi and these leaders, they were, quite furious about the role of Great Britain in India, and so these are some of the pictures. They even tried to be friends with the Muslim League at that time and asked them to join our movement so that it is converted into a very forceful movement, and the British are compelled to leave, without further negotiations. They just leave, and we will settle down our issues like this, right? You can see this All India Muslim League ka 26वां इजलास, right? 26th conference of All India Muslim League. So these kind of activities were going on in British India at that time during the Quit India movement and after the Cripps proposal, after when they were rejected, right? The British government came very, it resorted to repressive measures against the Indians. It arrested many top brass leadership of Hindu or Congress, right? So these were, mass movement. They were just, they were given a feeling that they are unwelcomed. They are unwelcomed in India, and they should leave, right? So they resorted to repressive measures, right? And lathi charging and these kind of things. With the arrest of the top brass leadership like Nehru and Gandhi, right? This Ram Manohar Lohia, Anura Asif Ali, right, and this Jay Prakash Narayan, Patwardhan and Nana Patel, this second brass leadership, it came to the forefront. It just, took control of the movement and gave a new dimension or, new dynamism to this Quit India movement. What was the Muslim League response at that time? Okay, so the Muslim League response was to divide and quit India, not just quit India, right? We need division before you quit, right? So this was the Muslim League response after everything, This was their response. Very well said, right? So now after the Quit India movement and the Cripps mission, and you need to keep it in mind that this was still the Second World War, right? Second World War hadn't come to an end. So Lord Wavell, he just gave some other proposals to the Indians, and then in order to get their approval, he asked them to meet him at Simla, right? So this was kind of another Simla conference, right? The previous one which we studied, that was related to the meeting of the Muslim delegates, right, regarding the separate electorate, but this time it was the British government or their representatives. They wanted the Muslims and the Hindus to meet them so that they can convince the Indians about something related to the war, and then as a result they were also offering some constitutional concessions to the Indians, right? So now we will see what was in the Wavell plan for the Muslims and the Hindus both, right? Now you can just see that the delegates are meeting with Lord Wavell, and they are just he is trying to convince them. This is what I have already told you, that he just presented his proposal to the British government and they gave him an approval. When they asked him that yes, you can go and negotiate this thing with the Indians, then he came up and he just discussed these things, right? Now what were in the proposals, or what was he asking the Indians about the Second World War, or about the concessions which the British government was about to offer, right? So Indian political parties would help the British in the war, then the government would introduce constitutional reforms in India after the war, right? If they help the British in the war, only then the government will introduce constitutional reforms which they are asking for, or which they were asking for. So they were quite informed about the demands of the Indian communities, and now they came up with something in exchange for those demands, right? They were asking something for it. Now, so what was the second thing? That the Executive Council would be immediately reconstituted, the Viceroy Executive Council, right? And its number of members would be increased, like the Indians are asking for more representation, for to make it more Indianized, you might call it, right? So they were saying that yes, we would do that, and just you need to support us in our war efforts, right? Muslims, like high-class Hindus, the Brahman, right, and the Muslims, they would be given equal representation in the Executive Council of the Viceroy, right? And then other minorities, you might call it, low-caste Hindus, Shudras, Sikhs, they would be also given representation in the council, so the minorities would not be ignored, but the upper-class Hindus and the Muslims, they would be given equal representation, right? This was another scheme, or this was another carrot which they were offering to the Indians, right? Now all the members would be Indians except these two, Viceroy and the Commander-in-Chief. They would not be Indians. The rest of the members of the Viceroy Executive Council, they would be Indians. So again, they were empowering Indians, like they would be the members of the cabinet and they would be the ministers. Just the Commander-in-Chief would not be Indian, and the Viceroy cannot be an Indian. He would be a British nominee, right? A British government nominee. So this is they were. You can just read between the lines that concessions were on its way. All they needed was that that the Indian communities should just agree with them that yes, they would support them in their war efforts, and then the Indian communities would in return get these things, right? Now these are some of the some of the things. Defense of the India, they said that it would be in the hands of the British. Now why it would be in the hands of the British? Because the Second World War was in its full flow, and as I have discussed, that Japan was already in Burma, and the Japanese threat, they were feeling this threat. So they did not want to hand over the defense of India to the Indians. They wanted to take care of that international front in the Second World War, so that this defense would be with them, and the rest of the things the Indians can decide about it, right? Now what was the response, or what happened, right? But if this thing is approved by the Indian people, then the same model will be applied in the provinces as well afterwards, right? If this is approved for the central legislature, then later on it will be replicated at the provincial level as well, right? Then again they say that okay, these are just suggestions, and it does not mean that if you approve these suggestions at this time, it will in any way affect the future constitution if you want to change it. So these suggestions are meant for the current situation, and you just agree with us, and then it would not mean that these are permanent solution. This is some kind of a permanent formula for India even after the Second World War. It would not be a permanent sort of formula. You can change it later on, but now if you accept it, it would be in the betterment of both these countries, the people of the countries, like Great Britain and India, right? Now those were the suggestions of, or that was the Wavell Plain, right? Now, in order to discuss the plain, he asked both communities, members of both these communities, to come to Simla and just have a process of deliberation over it, right? They were saying that, okay, equal representation will be given to the Muslims and the Hindus. Now again, the same issue. Congress was adamant. It was of the view that they are the representatives of all the Indians, including the Muslims. So that representation in Congress would nominate the Muslim members as well. While the Muslim League, it was saying that no, it would nominate the Muslims for the Executive Council, right? Again, on that issue, there was a deadlock. Now, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was representing Congress, just to show that, yes, we have got Muslims as well, right? Okay, but as I have told you that this conference failed, it did not serve the purpose, right? What happened when the conference failed and when both these communities could not agree regarding the Wavell Plain, right? Now what happened that they just, you know, went for and they announced general elections, provincial and central elections in India, right? The 1945 and 1946 elections. Now, in those elections, you know, what happened that, first of all, the Muslim Quaid-e-Azam declared that, you know, we cannot accept anything less than a separate homeland. This was kind of the slogan for the Muslims, right? This slogan was very much popular at that time, and the Muslims, as we have studied that in 1936-37 election, Muslim League could not secure majority in any of the provinces. But over here now, due to a lot of other reasons, the Muslim League would secure, you know, a lot of seats in the upcoming election or in the 1945-46 elections, right? We can see that. Now, Congress won 930 votes, right? In 8 provinces, it got absolute majority. The Muslim League, 428 out of 492 seats reserved for the Muslims. So the Muslim League defeated the Congress Muslim candidates on 428 seats. It only meant that the Muslims of India, they were now convinced that only Muslim League, All India Muslim League, is their sole representative. Congress cannot represent them. It would not safeguard their interests, right, or their rights. So it was a success. If you compare this result with the result of the 1936-37 election, and in the meantime you can, you know, recall the Congress rule, and then you can the atrocities committed against the Muslims in the Congress majority provinces, and then you can recall about the Cripps mission, and you know, I have already told you that during the Congress rule they had presented some reports like Pirpur Sharif and Fazl Haq reports, and all these things, you know, they the Muslims were kind of evolving, and they were you know, heading towards the support of Muslim League, right? Now they were convinced that Muslim League is their sole representative and Congress cannot represent them, right? There are some, you know, Quaid-e-Azam visited all over India, right? And he just, that was the election campaign, and he was visiting the whole of India and convincing the Muslims that Muslim League can represent you and you should not trust Congress. Congress is not your representative body. It is just a Hindu body serving the Hindu interest in the name of Indian interests, right? So that was a kind of election campaign. Now you can compare the results of election, right? Total seats in Bengal were 250, right? All India Muslim League secured, like the Muslim seats were 119, and All India Muslim League, it secured 114 seats, right? Now you can see in Punjab 175, the Muslim seats were 86, All India Muslim League secured 75, right? Now NWFP 50, the Muslim seats were 36, total seats were 50, 36, so 17 were secured by All India Muslim League, right? So you can just, you will get these slides and you can just go for this comparison, and you can see that how the Muslim League was gaining popularity among the Indians, among the Indian Muslims, right, by 1945 and 1946. Now another very important thing, now the elections have been held, right, and it is clear that the Muslims are supporting the demand of separate homeland rather than separate electorate. And why they were now when they were supporting it, how we can say that they were supporting it? Because they voted for the Muslim League, and the slogan of the Muslim League was, we need a separate homeland, we do not want to live in the united India, right? Now after this election, they realized, the British government realized that, okay, now the situation is quite serious, we need to address the situation. Things are not the same as they were previously, as we thought they were, right? So they, sent a special mission to India, right? And that mission was comprised of several cabinet members of the British Parliament, right? So that is why it is known as the Cabinet Mission Plan, right? Now these are names and portfolios of the members, right? You can study it. The purpose of the mission was to devise a machinery to draw up a constitution for independent India. Now you can see that they realized that they have to give independence to India. They cannot retain India as a colony. And now if they want to give independence to India, what would be the sketch of that independent India? They were somehow drawing that sketch of independent India, right? So they were on that path. Second objective was setting up of a constitutional or constitution body, right, for the future India. So this mission was kind of a declaration of the independence of India. If you just go through its proposals and what it was offering at that time, it was kind of a declaration that, okay, we are about to give you independence, but these would be the terms and conditions, and you should deal with the transitional phase in such and such manner, right? So it was like this, right? What did they propose? That there shall be a union of India which was to be empowered to deal with the defense, foreign affairs and communication. These three subjects, they would be with the center. The rest of the subjects, they would go to the provinces. So they were asking for a very, for a kind of India in which there would be provincial autonomy at its maximum limit, right? The separate state demand of the Muslim League. Now those of you who agree, who agree that the British government wanted to divide India because it was their policy, divide and rule, right? They wanted to divide India. They should just look into this thing, that even at this stage in 1946, they did not approve this separate state demand in this cabinet mission proposals or the cabinet mission plan. They did not approve of it openly, right? So they refused this demand. They said that, okay, it should be an undivided India, we would not divide it, right? Then they say that, okay, in the cabinet there would be minimum interference by the viceroy, right, on the issues of communal representation and these kind of things, right? Now again, it provided for the formation of constituent assembly on democratic principles of principle of population. Now democratic principle of population is quite simple, you just on equal on the basis of proportionate representation, you just send your representatives. So if you have got more population, you would be sending more representatives. If you have got less population, then you would be sending less representative. And if a province is having let's say like 10 million population, or 100 million population. So and if you set the number of representative, one representative per 0.2 million, right? So this is the kind of constituencies, demarcation of constituencies. So if a province is having 10 million, it would send 5 representative. If a province is having 100 million, 1 million, it would send 5 representative. If a province is having 10 million, it would send 20 representative. So it was on the basis of population, or that principle was followed, right? Not weightage or something like that. Again, it recognized the Indian right to cede from the Commonwealth. Like it said that, okay, in future, if that Constituent Assembly of India decides that we do not want to live in the Commonwealth, we want to go away from it, we want to have complete independence, then we would go. So that right has been accepted of Indians, that if they want to live with us in the British Commonwealth, they would live, otherwise they would not live. Now, the Union government and its legislature were to have limited powers dealing with the defense, foreign affairs and communications, right? But again, if it needed to raise some more finances to manage these 3 areas, these 3 subjects, then it would have some kind of leverage or authority to implement or devise such rules so that it can raise finances to deal with these defense, foreign affairs and communication, right? The rest of the subjects and the residuary powers, they were given to the provinces. As I have already told you, that it was provincial autonomy was ensured to the maximum level, so they were given to the provinces. Now for princely states, what did they say? They would retain all the subjects and all residuary powers. Now in the princely states, defense, foreign affairs and communication, even they would be retained by the princely states, these subjects, the princely states, or they would deal with these subjects of for their own states, right? So they were kind of autonomous within India. Okay, now a Constituent Assembly would constitute 389 members to draft the constitution. Out of those 389, 292 would be from provinces, and out of and then 93 would be from the princely states, right? So this was the composition of the central legislature at center, that this is how the central legislature would be formed, and then they would talk about the future of India and the future constitution, whatever they want. India was divided into 3 groups. Group A, Bihar, Bombay, UP, Madras, Orissa and CP, right? This was Group A, predominantly Hindu states or Hindu provinces, right? Group B, that was comprised of Punjab, Sindh, NWFP and British Balochistan or Balochistan. You know, British Balochistan we call it because there were some princely states as well in the Balochistan, so that is why we call it British Balochistan, or they called it British Balochistan at that time. The Balochistan which was under the British rule, the direct rule, not that Balochistan which was also comprised of princely states, right? Then Group C included Assam and Bengal. Now these groups were given the authority to frame their constitution jointly with other provinces of their respective group. So these groups would be making their constitutions jointly with other groups, like for example Balochistan, British Balochistan wants to make a constitution, so other members of the group, they can just kind of make their own constitution for this group. Same would be the case for this group, and same would be the case for this group, right? So this was, and if you see, we will later on discuss it in a map of India, but if you see, this is the current India mainly, this is the current Pakistan mainly, and this is the current Bangladesh, right? So they were already chalking out the map of India, the map which ultimately we saw in 1947, right? East Pakistan and West Pakistan, and then the India. Central provinces. Now, and again you would see something very very naive, I would say, right, over here. Well, Congress had agreed to join the Constituent Assembly, but saying it would be free to make changes in the cabinet mission plan. Now Congress said, yes, okay, we would do it, but we would make some changes if we want. If we think that these changes are supposed to be made, then we would make these changes. Okay. The Muslim League accepted this plan. First of all, you need to understand this. It accepted. Congress also kind of accepted, but said that okay, we would be making some changes. The Muslim League accepted, and keeping in view, just keep it in view that the separate homeland demand was not approved, in this cabinet mission plan, and even at this stage the Muslim League did not object to this plan. So the Muslim League and the Muslims, I would say till, they just tried their level best to be in the United India, and somehow convinced the Congress that their rights should be guaranteed in the United India, and then they would live in the United India. But the Congress, due to this, again at this level, at this stage, it said that okay, we would be making some changes. It just perturbed the Muslim League again, and then they announced for a direct action day, right? Direct action, and then a direct action day in August the same year. It was observed. The only purpose of that direct action was that okay, we do not accept anything less than a separate homeland now, right? So just give us a separate homeland, like divide and quit kind of thing, right? Okay. Though the Congress had rejected or said that okay, it would make some changes, and the Muslim League accepted, the Viceroy again asked the Congress to okay, come up and just join the cabinet, and the Viceroy Executive Council and this and that. It asked them rather than asking the Muslim League. The British government asked them, right? But later on he realized the futility of his action, that okay, without the participation of the Muslim League, the Muslims of India are kind of left out, from this formula or this constitutional scheme, so it would be of no use. And then he asked the Muslim League to join the Viceroy efforts and be part of that constitutional process. Now Maulana Abul Kalam Azad meeting with the cabinet mission in 1946, you can see him. Then Quaid-e-Azam meeting with them, right? Now Gandhi, after meeting with the Viceroy in New Delhi, you can see that. This is a cutting from the newspaper. You can see some of the highlighted parts, right? It doesn't give you a complete picture, but still, it was reported in this manner in one of the English dailies. This was their plan, Group A, Group B, Group C, and the princely states. Now you can see Group A, right? Balochistan, NWFP, Punjab, Sindh, and British Balochistan. This was princely state, right? These were princely states. Now Group C, right, and Group B. So you can see it like in this manner, right? Now what happened, that okay, everything was refined, everything was already decided. You might call it that it was just a matter of when and not how, right? So now we were heading towards that when would we be given independence, right? And now towards the partition. Now after a lot of deliberation and a series of talks with the Congress and the Muslim League leaders, right, Quaid-e-Azam made it quite clear that we would not accept anything less than a separate homeland, and All India Muslim League has got the support of the Muslims of India, and their election slogan was separate homeland, and the Muslims still voted for them. So it means that the Muslims have given their verdict in favor of partition, right? Now, okay, India would be divided, but now what would be the plan to transfer power to the Indians? Now, how would that transfer of power would be carried out? That thing would be carried out, right? So they just, discussed all the issues with the Indian parties, their representative, and then they devised this plan. They said that, okay, we will finalize a plan, but the Indians would not, the local Indians and the political parties, they would not see this plan until it is announced, right? Okay, this is these are the details of this. The plan was made public on June 3. That is why it is also called as the June plan, the partition plan or the June plan. We call it that as well, right? What was the plan? 2 separate states will be established in India. Number 1, the present Constituent Assembly will to act, but its constitution will not be applicable on the areas which will not accept it, right? So if, like the 1935 Act, right, that will be implemented in India, that was still implemented in India, and the present Constituent Assembly will be working, right? But if some areas do not want to accept that constitution, so that constitution will not be implemented on them. The power will be transferred the same year, like 1947, to the representatives of the India. And now, who were the representatives of the India? The Indians had already elected those representatives in the 1945-46 election. So they were talking about those representatives of India, right? Now, again, there were some issues. Everything was not clearly demarcated. There were some areas in which, that is the same discussion when we were saying that the Muslims in the Lucknow Pact, when the Muslims said that, okay, we would not insist that we are in majority in Bengal and Punjab. Now the same issue was again reflected over here, that was an issue, and they wanted to address this issue. So they said that, okay, Bengal and Punjab will decide in a separate meeting whether to accept the division of the provinces or not, right? And what to do, because these provinces were almost evenly divided between the Muslims and the Hindus. So these provinces will be deciding about their own fates, whether they want to be separated to be, or they want to either join this group or that group, or this state or that state, right? So now, if the Muslim majority areas, they do not want to join the present Constituent Assembly, they will create their own separate Constituent Assembly, and they are not supposed to join or to agree with this formula, right? Now, the legislatures of Punjab and Bengal, they voted in favor of partition, like Punjab would be partitioned and Bengal would be partitioned. They did not vote in favor of keeping their unity or keeping them as a whole, right? So they just decided that, okay, Punjab and Bengal, they would be partitioned, the Muslims would go to the Muslim states and the Hindus would join the Hindu states. So that is why these area, we see that they are partitioned now. Part of Punjab is in India and part of Punjab is in Pakistan, part of Bengal is in East Pakistan now, and part of Bengal is in India now, right? Okay, this is how it is. So the final award was announced on 17th August 1947. Now this is something problematic, like we just got independence on 14th and India got independence on 15th, but the award was announced on 17th, right? And we can see the primary causes of a lot of current day issues in this 3 days delay, right? They just accepted everything, and then when the award was announced, it was something else. They were considering that these parts would be included in Pakistan, parts of Punjab, right, and even parts of Bengal, which they were thinking that would be part of the Muslim state. They were made part of India, right? So the problem of Kashmir, we can see that it is just because of that award, that the passage was provided to India to just go into Kashmir and occupy it, right, because it was a princely state. So it was not part of the partition plan. The prince or the ruler of that state was supposed to decide, okay, right, Gurdaspur and Batala and Pathankot, they were given to India. And likewise, Amritsar, etc., they were also given to India, right? When the actual partition plan was announced on 17th August, 3 days after the independence of Pakistan and 2 days after the independence of India. So they came to know that, okay, they are part of India. The Muslims living in those areas, they were thinking that they would be part of Pakistan. Right? Again, Jalandhar, right, it was given to India. Now, so I have briefly discussed this point, right? So I would not go into detail again. Now you can see what happened in 1947 and what was the actual map of India in 1947. Now the yellow color or this orange, whatever you call it, this is India. This green is Pakistan. So over here and over there, this is Pakistan, West Pakistan, East Pakistan. Then the disputed area with a lot of yellow color and partially green color is with India. It is controlled by India and vice versa, right? So that is controlled by Pakistan. So this is disputed Kashmir, the occupied Kashmir, with a lot of yellow colors and small green lines, and then the green color and the yellow lines, it is what we call Azad Kashmir or Pakistani held Kashmir, and the other one is Indian held Kashmir, right? So this was the Boundary Commission Award or the Radcliffe Award, right? If you have got any question related to this, you can ask. Okay. Yes? Please be quiet.
Are connected together and they want the discussion to continue in somehow.
You are talking about the current days?
Yes.
Okay. So I think this is an important question. She is asking about the conspiracy theories and what about those views which some of the scholars present, that some of the Indians and the Pakistani leaders, they have just grouped together, they have been grouped together and they want this dispute to to continue so that they can gain something out of this dispute. They are very powerful conspiracy theories, right? I do not refute them without giving it a proper thought. So I don't know whether you can articulate it or not, but I have studied a little about it and I can articulate your answer, and I would say yes to this because they are very powerful theories. One point which they present is that there are always patches of peace and patches of conflict between India and Pakistan, right? So whenever there are patches of peace, the civilian governments, they just get a lot of money due to the peace initiatives with India, right? And the Indian civilian government, they also, they also gain a lot of things. But the trickle down effect of those gains, they are not seen on the masses in both countries. Only an elite, a civilian elite, is benefited from it. Now, when the military feels after a few years, after a cycle of 8 and 10 years, that the civilians have gained a lot from the peace process, and now it is their turn in both countries, it is their turn that they want to gain something out of it, then we see kind of a conflict between the two countries. The whole dialogue processes, they are just disrupted, and then the military comes in both countries, not directly, but at policy level. The military formulate policies for both countries regarding India and Pakistan, right? So the militaries and the generals of both countries, right? This is a conspiracy theory. I'm 100% approving it, but I cannot refute it, you know, then these military members of the military establishment, they gain out of it. They gain for themselves, not for the whole of the military, right? So in the process, whether it is peace, whether it is conflict, it is just a narrow elite, military and civilian, that they benefit from it. And the trickle-down effect of the good relations between the two countries are never observed on the masses of both countries, right? So in both cases, the masses, they are the sufferers, and the elites, they are the gainers, right? So I think that unless and until we come up with something which can strongly refute it, we cannot just refute this thing, right?
The thing is, the work of an army is whether to protect their country, or if they are actually trying to get an area, there's an order. Because the military and the army are always based on a set of rules. But what they're doing in Kashmir, there aren't any rules, there aren't any boundaries. They're just simply slaughtering people for no reason.
You are talking about Indian military?
Yes.
Okay.
So, sir, if there is no order and the politicians are totally deaf and blind to what they are doing there, so sir, it doesn't make any sense. Why are they calling? They shouldn't even call the Indians their military, because it's kind of a bad impression of what their army represents.
Yes, that is right. You can see the Intifada in Kashmir, the previous one, and even this current one after the killing of Burhan Wani, right? You can just see this thing in Kashmir that. So
it's like the black slavery.
yes, I agree with that. The Indian military has resorted to repressive measures in Kashmir, and it is not today. It has been since 1948. So they are using these repressive measures. But the Intifada of 1989 in Kashmir, you can call it Intifada, right? So the 1989, they hadn't seen anything the kind of that before, right? They just experienced that after the withdrawal of Soviet troops from Afghanistan, right? So there were a lot of Mujahideen, they were fighting in Afghanistan, there were a lot of Kashmiri Mujahideen as well, and then when that battlefield or that arena was closed, the only thing they knew was to fight, and then they found another place for themselves, you know, to find another oppressor over there and liberate the Muslims. So this is their indigenous kind of thing. A lot of Kashmiris, they went to Afghanistan to fight against the Soviet troops. Now when they went back to India, to Indian occupied Kashmir and the Azad Kashmir or the Pakistani held Kashmir, so they thought of, you know, starting another war against another oppressor. So after 1989, this mass killing and these kind of things, these incidents, they were reported quite frequently in the newspaper, and then we saw it in the news, in the international and local media as well. Agar wo kare hi na, if you say that if they do not suppress the Muslims would not rebel against them, right? This is one aspect of looking towards the things. The other aspect is that if the Muslims do not rebel, they would not suppress. But you know, there should be concessions should be given by both sides, not only by the Indians, not only by the Muslims. They should come to terms. They should talk with each other about, not with, like, you know, they cannot talk to the militants. They should directly talk to Pakistan about the settlement of this issue, because as you have seen that the United Nations has passed many resolutions regarding the plebiscite in Kashmir. So that plebiscite is not being conducted in Kashmir in order to ask them whether they want to join Pakistan or they want to join India. India is not allowing the Kashmiris to exercise that right of theirs, right? So this is a problem, and in current terms, I would clearly say that yes, India is an oppressor and it is oppressing the Kashmiri sentiments. It is trying to oppress it, and that is why this rebellion is there. But since 1940, like from 1948 till 1989, this kind of rebellion was not seen in Kashmir as we were seeing it afterwards then.
Sir, why are we dividing the Muslim majority area and Hindu majority? It's the people who want to join Pakistan, why are we just giving them right?
Can you be a bit loud because I cannot hear you?
So why are we not dividing the Muslim majority area and Hindu majority? Like the people who are willing to join Pakistan, like it's still human right? So why are we not standing for it? Sir?
You are talking in terms of Kashmir?
Yeah.
Well, Kashmir is a predominantly Muslim area, right? Hindus are there in Kashmir, but they are not in such a number that a separate Kashmir for Hindus or Kashmir should be divided between the Hindus and the Muslims. If you are dividing Kashmir, you are dividing Muslims of Kashmir. You are not dividing, Hindu and Muslim Kashmir.
That's what I'm saying. Like right now, the Muslims are under oppression, right? But Hindus, there are people in Kashmir who supports, who are there with India, right? Okay? But what I mean is that the Muslim majority, they should be included in Pakistan. Because this is their right to practice their religion.
Yes, this is their right, but that right, and who would come to know that whether there are Muslims or whether the Muslims they want to join Pakistan or India, that would be the plebiscite.
So we should give it to the decision of the public.
This is the decision of the public, but on international front there is a problem. On international front, only those resolutions of the United Nations are implemented which the powerful states want to implement. When the powerful states do not want to implement something, the resolutions of the United States, the United Nations, they are not more than just pieces of paper, right? So the Kashmir resolutions about Kashmir, they are the same kind of things. That the United Nations, it has passed this resolution, but the powerful states, because you need to understand one thing, that the United Nation is a body, and member states make this body either weak or strong, right? So you see that when it was the will of the United States of America, the resolution regarding Afghanistan in 2001, it was implemented in days, right? When it was the will of the United States of America, the resolutions related to Israel against Palestine, these are implemented in days. But when the will of the United States, because it provides, I do not know the current figures, because Donald Trump, he just said that okay, the United States of America should think about giving financial support to the United Nations, and other members should also contribute towards it. But previously the share of the American finances to the United Nations, that was 22% of the total budget of the UN. Now 196 members, 98 members, and one member is giving 22% budget. So definitely the say of that one member will be more than the other members. And then United Nations is not a country, right? It needs the troops of these member states to implement its will, right? So you can then again see the foreign policy, the lobbying of India with the United States, and the United States strategic interest in India against China in the region, and that is why it would never want the United Nations to implement a decision which might go against India, or which India does not want it to implement. So this is their strategic alliance. So yes, why morally it should do it, but practically it will not do it. Pakistan has taken stand so many times, right? But जरा दोबारा बोलें प्लीज. नहीं, इंडिया नाराज वाली बात है ही नहीं. We are not considering the Indian factor in it, but the thing is that Pakistan is a weak state. It cannot compel the United Nations to intervene in Kashmir. A powerful nation can do that, and the most powerful nation of the world, it is siding with India on the issue of Kashmir, that is the United States, right? Now the situation can change. with this CPEC and the strategic interest of China and China backing Pakistani stance over Kashmir and this and that, if you can see that there were previously, a few months back, there was some issue in Bhutan. Where the Indian troops just went and they stopped the Chinese development work over there, right? And then the Chinese Foreign Ministry, they issued statements in favor of Kashmir, and they said, okay, if India can come to another country to defend that country, it is simply giving, you know, approval to the intervention of a third state to resolve a conflict. That was a conflict area between China and Bhutan, right? So India went there and stopped Chinese development work. So it was referring towards the interference of China in Kashmir, right? Like the third state interfering in a weak state on behalf of the weak state, like India did in Bhutan. So China can do in Kashmir on behalf of Pakistan. It was referring to it, you know. So these kind of things, when, you know, in international relations there is no permanent friend and foe. It is your interest, right? So when the interest of the great powers would be aligned with the interest of Pakistan, then these things would happen. Otherwise they would not happen. Right now the strategic interest of the United States of America are in line with the interest of India. They are, that is just the biggest market for the US goods, and you know, in order to cultivate India against China, so they need Indian goodwill. That is why the United States would not go against it. But if another power like China comes to the rescue of Pakistan and to the rescue of Kashmir, and then Pakistan impressed upon that power, so then, you know, we can see kind of a solution for this issue, otherwise we won't see, right? Thank you.